All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at AIDC 21. We've got our fourth session of the day. I'm ready to get started with Brian Dusablon. Brian is going to be talking about no excuses, 10 things you can do right now to improve accessibility. Brian is an entrepreneur, a coach, a generalist, working for, is it the Learning Ninjas, I believe? Yes,
Correct.
founder of the Learning Ninjas, and also you've got a consultancy. It's Deuce Enterprises.
Correct. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So, and I've seen Brian around for years and years, like back in my conference days, just kind of hanging out there with all the smart kids in the in the e-learning world. So I'm so excited to actually have him here doing a TLDC event, and I'm really honored. He also was the one who had recommended our last speaker, Diane Elkins, to the program. So thanks for that, Brian. And with that, I will hide myself and let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the invite to this. And thanks to the translators. And this is a really awesome setup. So really appreciative. So my name is Brian Dusablon. Be talking about some things you can do right now about accessibility and inclusion. I think the big thing for me is that I've been talking about this and reading about this for a long time, and especially in our industry, I'm just kind of tired of the excuses. So there is a lot of things that we hear. I'm gonna go through a couple of the common ones that we hear, and then talk about some ways we can take action immediately in order to make a difference right now and to kind of keep things moving forward. I heard that over 800 people had registered for this conference. I think that's amazing. It's definitely progress to have that many people that are interested. So if you're here, I appreciate you, and I hope that you pull some things away from this. And super informal as well. So questions, please ask. There'll be a lot of times for Q&A. There is a resource link I just posted to the Learning Ninjas website, just a blog post that I'll link to at the end of this, so you don't have to worry about trying to take screenshots of slides or anything like that. How I got interested in this, essentially, I believe in equal access to learning. I believe that learning is one of the greatest things that a human being has as an opportunity. It creates all kinds of opportunities for ourselves, for families, for everything else. Learning allows us to change our minds. Learning allows us to change our careers and go in different directions. It allows us to help people. And I think that's mainly why most of us are here today at this conference. And I've been attending some of the sessions, and it's been really great to see. I think that the excuses for overlooking accessibility and inclusive design have been at all spectrums or all levels of organizations, right? Or if you're an independent contractor, or whether you're dealing with a client who has no idea about accessibility, or if you're dealing with an organization that doesn't care, doesn't focus on it, and you're one person, or you're one person on a team that doesn't have a strong leadership that does it, or maybe you're a manager, you are a leader, and nobody on your team has any formal training in accessible design or anything like that. So these are all different reasons or excuses that have been thrown out, and I'm just tired of hearing them. And I think there's enough information out there. There's sessions like this. There's Susie Miller's book. There's a whole bunch of resources that are available to us that we can no longer just say, I didn't know, or I don't know how to do that. So some of the things that we might hear, right, we don't have time to add that, as in accessibility is some kind of add-on feature that's just a bonus for some people. That's ridiculous, right? We need to make time for it. And I think Susie even mentioned one of the quotes I just saw recently on Twitter too, that was that, we're not finishing our job. If we're designing something that's inaccessible, then we didn't do a complete job. And that is a huge thing. So not having time for it is no longer an excuse. We don't have anybody in like that in our company. I know Jane Bozarth wrote an article specifically leading with this for the Guild, and I've heard that in organizations before. We don't have to design for that kind of audience, or we don't have anybody like that in our company. Well, what about tomorrow? What about next month? What about 2 years from now? You will have somebody that needs to access that content. And so that's no longer an excuse. It never should have been one in the first place. We're going to have to charge extra for that. So we've heard that a couple of times, especially recently in some projects or in some partnership things. And it's like, wait a second, this is just part of good design. So charging extra to add that or add accessibility as an add-on or some kind of extra feature that costs more is also not acceptable. So then we get into some really positive quotes, right? So accessibility is solved at the design stage. Daniel Nah, this is great. This is exactly where I started to shift my thinking about accessibility in terms of developing content, whether it be in storyline or presenter, different authoring tools that we've been using over the years, and trying to build it in at the end is not the answer. All right, so it is design. It's part of the design process, and it is solved at the design stage. If disabled people were truly heard, an explosion of knowledge of the human body and psyche would take place. I love this quote. I referenced the who said it in the notes. Just be thinking about how we can listen better to people around us and across the spectrum of ability and literacy and things like that, and listen and hear them and then do something with that information, right? We have this great opportunity to take that and create learning that everybody can learning experiences that everybody can learn from. And I know Susie mentioned this one at the end of her presentation. How many opportunities do we have to dramatically improve people's lives just by doing our jobs a little bit better, right? This is Krug, and this is just basically at the end of the day, at the end of this presentation, at the end of this conference, the 10 things you can do right now, it all comes down to this. We can take these actions immediately in order to improve people's lives just a little bit better, right? We don't have to do a whole lot more. We just have to do a little bit right now and then continue to improve over time. So I want to be on the side of the last 3 quotes rather than the first 3, right? So that's how I've kind of laid out this presentation and how I look at things. And then getting into the what actions you can take immediately. There's no excuse for you not to take immediate action today, whatever role you're in, right? So I don't want to hear any more excuses. I'll come back to that. So these are the things that I think it'd be nice if everybody just had this by default, but it's not always the case, and that's okay. So you can learn you can learn empathy, you can learn how to be more compassionate in your design and in your development and in your practice, whatever role you're in. But these things that are paramount to creating good content in the universe and putting good stuff out in the world that people can learn from. And then coming back to the idea that we have this great power as instructional designers and developers and training leaders to enable people to change their entire world by learning something new. And why would we limit who had access to that? Why would we limit who could do the things that we're trying to teach? And let's really focus on taking some steps to change the practice in our industry. So I'm going to jump right into the 10 things that I think you can do starting today or starting tomorrow. Today's Friday, so maybe it's starting on Monday, but that's okay. Just start soon and start now. So build this into your design practice. The biggest thing that I hear is, how can we make something accessible? And it's way too late in the game. So touching back on the early thing about this is a design, this is solved at the design stage. Build this into your design practice. If you're not doing this in your storyboarding and your instructional design and your initial concept of what kind of interactions you want to make, and you're not looking at Stephen Lambert's 12 lenses of accessibility, for instance, early on in your design sessions, your design jams, and your concept mapping, whatever you do to kick off your design phase, if you're not considering everybody, if you're not looking at inclusive design, if you're not looking at universal design principles, if you're not looking at what kinds of interactions can be accessible, what kinds of content, then that's a miss, right? So build this into your design practice. And there are methods to do this, right? So from UX field, there's design systems that are being built in, and there's resources and research out there for you to strategies for you to implement this. But even if you start today, just very, very basically, every storyboard that you do with whatever images or mock-ups that you're doing, write the alt text for all those images that you want to use in the storyboard. That's something you can do tomorrow, right? Look at the colors that you're using for your style guides, for your course templates, for your branding, whatever you have, and check it with contrast. Check it for color blindness. What are those colors representing? What are those colors showing up for other people? The resources, the tools out there to do this, it's so freaking simple now. It's like you just upload an image and then it'll tell you whether it's WCAG compliant. There are new tools popping up all the time that allow you to do this. So there's no excuse not to do these things at the very beginning in the design phase. And in just the conversations that you're having in this piece, in this part of the process, and thank you, Cithara, I think I said right. So for sharing the Stephen Lambert link, that's exactly what you look at. Have those conversations around those 12 lenses of accessibility. And they talk about animation, they talk about motion, talk about control, user control, right? So something we often think about is we build this fancy interface and we're essentially taking control away from the learner, taking control away from the user. And that is not okay. So stop doing it. And that's a conversation that you can have in your early conversations in your design, if you're whiteboarding or whatever you're doing, they say, hey, let's think about this. If we build this kind of interface, are we going to take control away from the user? If we build this kind of animation, are we risking, is it too fast of an animation? What are the things that we need to think about? And then you can start to build a list of things to check as you're going through your design and development processes, so that you are you making sure that you're checking back against your accessibility and inclusion principles. So there are, like I said, a number of resources that can be found on our website. There's an accessibility resource link for the colors, especially in the storyboards. You can do that starting today. Next up comes back to defining standards. And I emphasize your standards here because you can take the Learning Ninja standards, which we're actually in the process of redoing for design and development, and try to just follow them exactly as they are. But that's not going to be relevant to you or as accurate as they should be, because your constraints are different than ours. And our constraints vary by project. So different vendors, different tools that we're using for a project, different clients, they all factor into how we define our standards. But we do have a core set of standards that's like, we are going to write alt text for every image, and we're going to do it in the storyboard phase, and we're going to get that approved early on, not wait until the end. So there are a lot of standards that you can write, but you need to define them for yourself if you're an independent, for your team if you're part of a team, for your organization if you're a leader. And this is something you can start right now. You can start with 5, right? So alt text and contrast checking, the really simple stuff, closed captioning and scripts and making sure that you're checking all these things, but define them for you, for your organization, and do that now. If you wait until you're 5 or 6 more projects in, then you've missed an opportunity to kind of start from this day forward in creating more accessible and inclusive content. So I really encourage you to actually define these standards. One of the reasons that we're revisiting ours is because we're using a lot more external contractors right now. We want to share our standards with them, both to educate and also to make sure that it's in line with our values and our core principles of designing content, putting it out in the universe. So we are, like I said, redefining those. There'll be a blog post about it when we're finished in our process of going through it. So if you want to follow along, subscribe and we'll figure that out. If you have questions about how we're doing it, I'd be happy to talk through it outside of this conference. And then revisit those frequently, right? So as authoring tools change, as your LMS changes, don't just grab one checklist and be like, these are the 5 things we need to check, or these are the 20 things we need to check before we go, before we publish. Revisit them frequently. Figure out what's new research that's out there, what what new resources can we use to check for color or check for screen readers and things like that. And I would say I would encourage you to do this both for design and development. So we build QA and accessibility checks into our development process, but we have different standards for design. So it's the upfront design process and those standards, and then when we hand it off or when we are doing the development, we have a second set of standards for development. And I would encourage you to build those and start building those today. Third one is be inclusive. This is super high level, but you can learn and start being more inclusive immediately. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 years ago, but I'm learning, and I'm always learning, and how I write is different now than it was 5 years ago. What I think about when I'm designing, who I'm thinking about, has changed, right? And consider more than just common disabilities and or what 508 tells you to do. Learn more about these situational, temporary disabilities, right? Think about. So when I started learning about this, one of the things that I did, I broke my hand playing rugby in college, and I couldn't use my mouse anymore, and I was doing work online. And so I had to use keyboard navigation, and luckily I was using the system before everything got messed up on the internet, and everything was actually more accessible. I could tab through all the fields and do the searches that I need to do and do everything with it. But it got me thinking about, like, that was a temporary disability that I had, and it made me think that there are other things like that, right? Temporary mobility issues, temporary hearing loss, temporary vision, all these things can happen. And then thinking beyond just physical, injuries and disabilities, and thinking about neurodiversity, thinking about reading levels and literacy, right? So that was one that I learned a couple of years ago from Gene Maripodi, is how big of an assumption I had in who my audience was and what their literacy level was. And that's really helped me simplify and condense my content and my writing and improve that by just understanding that and being more inclusive of that. And I think some of the tools that you can use to do this piece, is things like empathy maps and personas, and then have conversations. Have a lot of conversations with different kinds of people. Find them in your organization. Reach out to people on social media, put a form out on your website that allows people to contact you and give you information and give you feedback that can be anonymous, but be more inclusive in everything that you're designing and developing, and do the work now to research what that even means. What is writing changing by using different kinds of pronouns? What does that mean? Which pronouns should you use in your writing? All of these resources exist out there. We just have to do the work to use them in our practice. The fourth one is get help. So by showing up to this conference, like, I'm really proud of all of you. Really, I really am, because there have been sessions that we've done, that Diane has done, that other people I know that have done around accessibility, that have 5 people in them or 10 people in them or whatever. So like I said, having 800 plus people, having 179 people in this session, that's awesome. So I want to see that grow. And you can get help from the people that are speaking here. You can get help from all the people that are in these sessions. Make those connections. Ask for help on Twitter. There's Learn Chat on Thursday nights that you can tap into. There's a whole lot of things. There are user groups. There's a Lectora accessibility user group that's really awesome. It's run by Christine O'Malley, I believe. There's a ton more books and websites that are available now to us than were 5 or 10 years ago. And I think that you can ask for help and get it. Don't be hesitant to do that, and get help from within your organization and outside of your organization. The fifth thing you can do is prototype and test early. You should be doing this as good design practice anyway, but this is one of the things that testing part often gets missed when we're doing early designs, because all we're doing is prototyping and testing it with the stakeholder, and we're not actually including anybody else in that testing. And I think that the opportunity that we have there is to find where we're screwing up really early in the process. And so I really highly recommend that you do some prototyping, whether it's screen designs or interaction types that you're going to use. Get a few of those and then run them by some folks and say, hey, let's look at this and check for this. Is this going to be an accessible interaction? Should we be doing this? Are these colors, is the screen layout navigable? Is our tab order making sense? Is the tab order even doable within Storyline, for instance? Are there going to be accessibility issues based on the limitations that our authoring tools give us? So we are really limited right now in e-learning authoring tools, right, that give us very tight restrictions on what we can do to actually export accessible content. So we really have to test that early, and test it with screen readers. There are free downloads for screen readers that you can do. So you can just be like, hey, here's four screens. This is how I'm going to lay it out. This is what I'm thinking. Run that through. Grab all of your text that you're using for your content and run it through the Hemingway app, which is hemingwayapp.com, and see what literacy level you're at. It's not perfect. It's not 100% accurate, but it gives you a really nice kind of quick look at where you're at with your content. And like I said, use the color contrast checkers. Check the 12 lenses. I use the 12 lenses as a guide 3 or 4 different times throughout the design and development process. Just be like, hey, are we adding some kind of weird motion here that we don't need that is maybe going to cause an issue for somebody? Are we adding in a button or some sort of interaction type that is going to be a little bit harder to navigate with the keyboard? Those are things that you can think about and test really early and get some other people to take a look at it and then ask them. And then hopefully you have standards that you've started to build, and you can reference those when you're getting your testers to help. The sixth one is really improving content. This is something that you have almost full control over. Now, you may not be able to change all of the meaning of something from a subject matter expert, but you can certainly edit their text and make it more readable. You can edit their image requests and make sure that they're useful images that actually have some meaning to the content, and write the alt text for that, or help subject matter experts or other people that are part of the project write good alt text. If you just improve the level of reading, the reading level that you write to, and add good alt text, that's improving your content. You can start that today. There are a number of websites that have great information about how to write good alt text, right? So that it's not just man holding computer or dog on cliff or something like that, right? So writing good alt text is, what is that actually going to sound like in a screen reader to somebody? What meaning does that image have to the content? Or just mark it as decorative so that it doesn't show up for somebody who can't see it. And then the idea of checking against things like pronouns and even you can go as far as checking things for dyslexia, some other things like, how is your spacing? What do your screens look like? These are all things that you can do immediately, and whatever phase of the project you're in right now, whether you're already started to develop it, hey, take a pass at it and try to improve some of that content. If you're in storyboarding phase, then that's the time to do it. The seventh big thing that we can do is look outside our industry. So we, as an industry, and I'm calling the industry the e-learning or training industry or whatever, we do a crap job of talking about this stuff. It's getting better. This session is great. We're making some progress, but compared to the web industry and software industry and the gaming industry especially, we're doing a really terrible job. We need to do better. And so I encourage you to look outside, look at the gaming industry and look at what they're doing for accessible games on the Xbox and computer games and things like that. They're doing amazing things that you can pull little pieces from and add to your learning content. Look at hospitality industry and look at physical accommodations and design changes that people have made to to improve access and to improve usability for everybody, right? So there's a great story about curb cuts, at crosswalks and going into buildings and stuff that 99% Invisible writes about. Again, the link there is on the site that you can read about, and it's a great example of something that it helps everybody, right? That's outside of our industry. That's not an e-learning solution, right? It's a architecture decision, or it's a design solution. So look outside this industry and find inspiration, find stories that you can tell to people that are, maybe even holding you back from doing what you want to do, or stakeholders that are saying we don't need to do that. Talk about it from a perspective of look, this improves the content for everybody. It's not like you're adding this thing or doing this thing at the design phase, and then it makes it harder for me to learn from because I can see, or anything like that. It's improving it for everybody. So look outside the industry and see what other people are doing. See level access. There's Derek Featherstone. If you're on Twitter, it's at Feather, Feather. Has amazing presentations and writing about accessible systems, accessible software, websites, and things like that. Look at web services and consulting companies, not the one click, we're going to make your site accessible, because that's bullshit. Do the level access, Nobility, look at user experience conferences, look at those types of things that are outside of the learning space and see what they're doing and what they're learning about creating content for everybody. And then this really leads into a big one for me, which is pushing vendors. So we have, in our industry, we have a very small, really, set of vendors. There's a whole, there's a lot more systems out there now than there were, but as far as authoring tools go, there's very few. And so we've got to push the vendors a lot more. We've got to ask for things. We've got to call them out when they're not doing enough. I would love to see accessibility built into the workflow of something like Storyline or Rise, where as soon as I add an image, it actually pops up to alt text saying you need alt text or you need to make it decorative. WordPress does a better job of this. So if you use WordPress for your websites, if you do a color background and a color text, it'll actually tell you, hey, this doesn't match up. There's no reason our authoring tools shouldn't do that for us as well. And then things like so color and alt text, some of these things can be built into the workflow a lot better than they are now. So push the vendors, push the systems. If your LMS, if you know your LMS has accessibility issues, talk to the vendors, talk to them, call them out, whatever you need to do. Let's really, as an industry, I think, come together and push these vendors. Create a tick list, just a list of items that you're like, this doesn't work, this isn't going to work, this is causing issues for users, or this is potentially an accessibility issue, and make them aware of it and talk to them about it. So along these lines, this comes back to being an advocate, right? So one of the things that we often do is we get buried in our own little, our little caves. We're doing content, we're doing things, we're taking orders, we're knocking stuff out, we're doing whatever we can do. But let's level up a little bit and be considering everybody. And as I mentioned, talking through this idea that we have so much power in creating content that people learn from, and if we can make that a little bit better, if we can do our jobs a little bit better, do a little bit more complete in our design, then think about how many more people can learn from that content, right? So the more that we learn and apply to what we're creating, and then tell people about it, shout it out, go everywhere and be like, hey, I learned this thing and this is awesome and I really want to add this to our design thing. Or, hey, friend that's not even in the e-learning industry, this is what I learned today and this is who I want to help and this is how I'm going to do it tomorrow. And be that advocate for people and raise awareness and amplify voices, and find the people that can give you real stories and then amplify their voices. So really be an advocate for this and learn what you can do. And that's something you can do. Again, you can do that starting today. So take these slides, take the primer, get the videos from this session, share them with teams, share them with people, share them with people who couldn't attend this conference, and let's really, increase the number of people that are paying attention to this and learning from it, and then we can all grow together. And I would encourage you to talk to your kids about it, talk to your different people, and you'll often find that leads to a conversation where you learn something more as well that you can apply back in this situation. And this last one is really huge for me, because one of the things that I learned early on, I'll do a quick backstory. The first thing that I really paid attention to accessibility was we created a course, a corporate information security course, and we had this great idea to where we were going to do this dark, like shadowy characters and things like that theme. So it was a very grayscale, very dark, gray on gray, and things like that. And we built this entire course, and it was a compliance course within our organization. We built it all out. We published it. We didn't find out until we launched it that it was nearly impossible to read with anybody that had a contrast issue or low vision. And it was we had our color contrast between the text on the slide and the gray in the background was not enough. So we didn't know we were doing anything wrong. I didn't know as much about it as I should have. And so I learned a lot in that. But the thing that I learned the most was that it was really hard for that person that called it out to figure out how to contact us. So it took us almost I think it was 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. It was a ridiculous amount of time to learn that this person was not able to read or take this compliance course. And it had to go through 3 channels, like manager to, HR to us or something like that. So one of the things that we can do starting today is create an accessibility statement, create a form on your website, create a SharePoint form if you have to use SharePoint on your intranet. Use an Airtable form. There's 100 different ways you can create a communication channel that allows people to tell you when they find something that needs to be improved, or when they want to help you, right? So we talk about getting help. Well, you can source help just through a simple communication form or a help desk form or something like that. The key to this communication channel, though, is that you have to make it anonymous first. Right. So you should not make somebody reveal their disability in order to contact you about something. You should make it anonymous, and then they can opt into the information that maybe they want to share more and they want you to follow up with them or whatever. But open up communication channels. If you use Slack, create a channel just for this stuff so that people can come in and say, hey, we found this in this content, or I learned this thing yesterday at this AIDC event or this AID conference, and I want to share it with the team, and create that channel so that everybody can learn from that, and that you can receive information about when you're missing something and where you can improve. And it doesn't mean you're going to be able to fix that issue, but you can at least say, I hear you, here's what we can do, and here's, within our constraints, and then have that conversation. And I think that you really need to, if you don't have something like that right now, that should be a priority. Open up that channel. And then within your own teams, that you can take that to another level and say, hey, we want to be more inclusive and we want to create more accessible content. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to open up an open idea board or some kind of channel where people can just drop in ideas or drop in standards that they want to see implemented. And all of these things that are being communicated to you and maybe by you can be used to create those standards and to change your design practice and to, build resources and also to gain buy-in from stakeholders or funders. So you start to get all this feedback. Maybe you get 12 or 15 or 20 entries that say, hey, I couldn't take this because the system was there. Well, that can help drive your change in a system, or that can help you get money to go out and buy a different authoring tool. Or if you have this idea that you're like, I don't want to use an authoring tool anymore, and you can say, hey, this is why. and now I'm going to go over here and use an email course or something that's a little bit more accessible. So I think those things, opening up that channel for communication, is really going to help you. And again, it's something you can do today, tomorrow, or Monday if you're not working on the weekend. So the big thing about all of these steps, right? So these 10 things you can do today, it comes back to the excuses that we hear all the time. So for me, for the first 5-10 years of my instructional design or development career, it was ignorance. I just didn't know, and it was a little bit harder to find information then. It's not anymore. It's all out there. There are books. The coming back to outsider industry, Designed for Real Life by Eric Meyer, and Sasha, I forget her name. My apologies. Is the best book that I've read. So thinking outside of typical websites and things like that, it's really like Designed for Real Life. These are the issues that people in the real world have all the time, and they tell a bunch of great stories that will really help you rethink. And I think that's another great book that you can give to leadership, because it's a short read. It's real human stories, and it comes back to kind of that idea that these things are solved at the design stage, right? So if you're designing for real life includes a lot of people with a lot of different things going on. They could just be upset one day, or they could be, there's all kinds of things that are happening. So if we take a step back and we're designing technically for everybody, then we are going to do a better job of getting this done, right? So I think that Designed for Real Life book is really, really excellent. The other thing I'll say is that the reason I was like, these are 10 things you can do right now, is I know that you can't do everything. And I know that you're busy and you're working on projects that have deadlines and budgets and things like that. But if you do a little bit, then we're going to make a difference. And I think if you can commit to doing this better from this day forward, then it's really awesome to see what can happen as 800 or 175 people or whatever start to improve their design practice and start to be an advocate and start to share what they're doing. Show your work, share what works and what doesn't work. Talk about what you tried to do something in Rise, but it didn't work well, so we had to do this workaround. There are 100 different workarounds that we have to do with these authoring tools, right? So I would like to know what y'all are doing. I'd like to know how you're making Rise more accessible. We're working on a bunch of Rise modules right now, and we're trying to make them as accessible as possible. And what are the best practices? So get out into the Storyline forums, get into the Adobe forums, DevLearn and different sessions, and the TLDC and all these groups. Get out there and let's have these conversations. And I know that I don't know everything, but I am committed to making things better as I go forward, and learning and listening, and then doing something with that new information. So I encourage you to kind of take this mindset of, from this day forward, I'm committed to being a better designer. I'm committed to being a better developer. I'm committed to being a better leader and advocate for people that aren't frequently represented, or aren't frequently thought of in our design practice. And so when you come back to this idea that accessibility is an outcome of good design. So if you're doing your job, if you're making good design, your content will be accessible. If you're not knowledgeable enough about that, that's on you. So do the work to research, and the resources and read Susie's book. I just ordered it, so I'm excited to read that. Read Diane's system stuff. Read Diane's. They have a 508 reference on her website. These things exist. All right, so they're out there. They're linked to on our website. We have a primer. There's a text course that I did last year that needs significant improvement, but it's still decent. So if you want to send that to people, get them more information, and then jump into things like Learn Chat mentioned here in the chat. So let's be better designers, and let's really be as inclusive as we can be. And this goes beyond just accessibility and basic 508. So with that, I will open this up for Q&A. I appreciate you all being here and listening to my rants. There are resources out there on the Learning Ninjas website. There's another blog post that I'll share here in the chat that is specifically for this session. And I encourage you to, reach out and let's have a conversation about it. I'd love to talk to you about what you're working on and how you're improving, because I can learn a lot from you as well. So thanks.
Hey, Brian, is it okay if I ask you a couple questions from the Q&A area?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, cool. So Kate Whitaker is asking, what is your perspective on VPATs?
Drop this link in here really quick. Sorry.
No problem.
On VPATs, is that the standards for the softwares?
I don't know. Kate, if you could just
can you
I just read it out.
Can you define that?
Yeah, I'm definitely a newbie when it comes to all this stuff, but yeah, what is your perspective on VPATs? That was her question. Let me see if she VPATs are for software, volunteer vendor accessibility statements.
Yeah. So that the thing about those is that for me, it's not enough, right? So we always have. So they have like the authoring tools that we use have them, or some of them have them, which helps us navigate like what is doable within those constraints. But I don't think they're comprehensive enough, and I think they can do a lot more.
Nice.
And I would love to see that. I really love to see the vendors have accessibility statements, have much more, public information about what they're doing and their roadmap specifically around accessibility.
Yeah. Chris Willis from Lectora had posted that, that Lectora is all in, but do you have any other vendors that you could recommend at all? Or is that something that
So I think I know Lectora historically has done a lot around accessibility and made it a lot easier. I'm not sure, haven't used their platform since they were acquired recently. I know that Pebble that's coming out is supposed to be a lot more accessible. There's a tool called Evolve Authoring, which is built on the ADAPT framework, and the ADAPT framework is definitely a lot more accessible. And I don't know where this Evolve is one that got acquired by, I think it's Intellum. And I haven't seen a roadmap for that product. I don't even know if it's still available I know it's out there on the web, evolveauthoring.com. But that's one that actually, as you create content, it sort of locks you into or encourages you to add alt text, for instance, and add descriptions, and build much more accessible content as you go. I know Pebble is just about to launch a pro version. So, I know they're trying to work hard at being accessible. And I know the Domino folks, Claro, they work a lot in accessibility standards. So those are some, but again, we haven't used them exclusively myself, so I don't want to offer any more opinions than that.
Right. No, thanks for that. I've got one more that's voted up here. Jeanette Brooks, she's asking, ideal world, we design for accessibility from the beginning, but what are some best practices for making improvements on existing courses, short of tearing it all down and starting over? Looking for your best suggestions on retrofitting.
Yeah, that's a good one. So one of the things that I would recommend is, taking those kind of top 10 things. So, looking at alt text and color contrast and things like that. Those are things you can open up a course in your authoring tool and spend, a day or less making some small improvements, and making sure that it's alt text. Tab order is one. So if somebody just has a keyboard, the things that you want to think about, you may not be able to rewrite all of the content, right? Especially if it's a really long course, but you can go through it and check the tab order so that if you're tabbing through different things, if you're only using a keyboard, that you can actually do that, that your alt text on all the images that you want alt text for that are useful and meaningful. And then the color contrast one is super easy because you literally just take a screenshot of your course screen and put it up on the colorcontrastchecker.com, and see where it's missing, and then go in and fix that thing either in the master slides or somewhere. So those are three things you can do. I think if you have a little bit more time, I would basically something that I think it was Target did. They had not really focused on accessibility for a while. And then when they did, they were like, okay, from this day forward, everything new we create is going to meet these standards. And then what we're going to do is go back through our massive, library of courses. So it depends on how many courses you have, and prioritize the ones that either are most accessed or most important, and start with those and put those back through a refined design process. And that's something you can build into a maintenance cycle. It's something you can build into a prioritization. I think that's something that you can absolutely do, and then retrofit a little bit here and there.
Brian, thank you so much for this. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I also want to be sensitive to our incredible interpreters that have been,
Yes,
working
thank you
this
very much.
entire event. So amazing. You had incredible takeaways, Brian. I can't say enough about your generosity sharing this stuff with us. Everyone, please, make sure that you take note of Brian's email address, and maybe even just grab a screenshot of this particular page. Again, I'll be sharing the recordings for today's sessions after this event completes. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll end this session, and we'll see everyone in the next one. Thanks again, Brian. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Okay, bye. Brian, really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Okay, bye.